Can you believe today is the last day of 2017 already? It seems like 2 weeks ago we were ringing into 2017, and now it's already almost 2018. Does anybody else besides me feel like the years get shorter every year? Anybody else? Am I the only one? Everybody's hands going up. Every year seems to go by faster than the year before. Why do you think that is? Is it because we're busier? Because, they say when you're busy, time goes by. In fact, we tried a little experiment about a month ago. Remember that? I gave you 1 minute to greet each other. And then I called you back together, and I got up here, and I just watched my watch for 1 minute. And it seemed like that 1 minute while we were waiting took forever, and the 1 minute greeting went by so fast. It is true, when we're busy, I think time goes by faster. But are we really busier now than we were 10 years ago, than we were 15 years ago? I mean, are we busier than kids? I mean, kids are always on the go, so you would think their time would go by fast. But it seems like for kids, time seems to take forever, and we get older, and it's like, where'd time go? I have my own theory as to why that is. I think it's because our perspective is different as we get older. To a 2-year-old, 1 year seems like an eternity because that's half their life. That's a long time. When you get to be 10 years old, the year goes by quicker because you've already lived 10 years, and now at 1 year is only a tenth of your life, so it seems like, it's a short period of time. And then when you get into your 50s, like I am, I'm mid-50s, that's 1/50th of my life. And so it's like, wow, where did time go? Because I'm comparing it to the time I've already lived. Now, I'm not sure if that's entirely the reason or not. That's my thinking. That's the way I think it is. And since I'm the one preaching this morning, that's the perspective we're going with. When you get your chance at the pulpit, you can bring your perspective out. But time does seem to go by faster as we get older. It was obvious by watching the hands go up, and it seems like the older people got, the more of them had their hands in the air. Some of the younger people haven't figured that out yet. But it is natural this time of year to look back and evaluate what happened this past year. So some of you are already doing that. We're going to talk about that a little bit this morning. This past week, newspapers and other news outlets have highlighted things that they felt were newsworthy this past year. They've highlighted everything from famous people that passed away to the economy and weather patterns. They say, let's do the year in review. We're going to be doing that a little bit at our annual business meeting coming up in January. We'll review the past year. And then it's also a good time to look into the new year. Facebook, if you have Facebook, it has a neat little app which will take all your posts from the past year and make a mini video of your year in review. And sometimes it's fun to watch those and see what your friends have done. If I wanted to find out who you really are, would I get an accurate picture of who you are by watching your Facebook year-end video? Some are shaking their heads no because they don't use Facebook, so it's not going to do it. It always asks me if I want to do that. I always say, no, people want to know. They can go back and look at my year if they want to. I mean, I'm not going to push that little thing. But the video can only put in there what you posted the past year. So it's taking all your posts from the past year and it's saying, this is your life. How about the people that the only thing they ever do is share somebody else's post? What does that tell you about their past year? Or how about people that only use Facebook to grumble and complain? Well, maybe that is an accurate picture of their life. Maybe they just grumble and complain. Or those that exaggerate everything and make themselves look better than they really are. I mean, Facebook is assuming that you're being honest in your posts. And so it's saying, this is what you did the last year. Did you really do all those things? Or did you just wish you did all those things? But that is a neat little app, and it's their way of looking back and seeing what we've accomplished and what we've done this past year. Well, this past week, many people have been looking back at their past accomplishments and failures. And they're making goals or resolutions based on the observations of last year, hoping to make next year better than the year before. Let's be honest. How many of you have made at least one resolution for next year? Raise your hand. Okay, some. How many have not? Raise your hand. Why not? Probably because you've learned it doesn't do any good, right? You used to make resolutions. If you notice, it was mostly the younger people. Most of the hands that went up were here in the front part, and that's usually where most of our younger people tend to sit. This is where I didn't see any hands back there in the back. Because you guys have made resolutions when you were younger and you didn't follow through. And you say, what's the value of making a resolution if I'm not going to keep it anyway? I'm not saying resolutions shouldn't be made. It is good to set goals. But if we're setting goals just because it's that time of year, we need to set them. If we know we're not going to do it anyway, then there's no sense making a goal. There was a young boy that loved riddles. How many of you love riddles? There's a young boy that loved riddles. And so one day he came to his dad. He said, okay, Dad, there were 3 frogs on a tree branch that extended out over a pond. Now follow along with me here, okay? One of the frogs decided to jump off. How many frogs were left? How many were left? 2. That's what his dad said. That's what the guys at the mission said when I shared this at the mission on Thursday night. They said 2. I said, you answered exactly the way his father did. The boy said, no, Dad, you didn't listen to me. Let me say it again, okay? There were 3 frogs on the branch of a tree overlooking the pond. One decided to jump off. How many were left? They said, oh, okay, I get it now. When the one frog jumped off, the other 2 followed him. So there weren't any frogs left on the branch. Oh, he says, no, Dad, you're not paying attention. I never said the frog jumped. I said the frog decided to jump. That's the problem with our resolutions. We make a decision that we're going to do something. But just a decision doesn't do any good. We have to follow through. We have to put action behind our words. And that's why so many resolutions fail, because in theory, in our minds, it sounds really, really good. I'm going to lose 100 pounds this year. Well, I'm not. If I did, it'd be more realistic to say, I'm going to lose 10 pounds this year. That's probably more of a realistic goal. I could do that. Or if you're me, a more realistic goal for me, one that I know I can keep, would be to make a resolution. This year, I'm going to eat more and exercise less. I can keep that one. That's easy. But we set these goals that are really unrealistic. They sound good, and if we could actually do them, they would be good. But we don't really think about what we're saying. Is this something that I have the willpower? Is this something that I have the commitment to, that I can really make this happen? Health clubs love this time of year. People make their resolutions. They're going to get in shape. I'm going to work out 3 days a week. That would be good. Most of us could use that. I'm going to work out 3 days a week, so I go out and I buy the membership. And most people pay a whole year in advance or something, or they sign up, or they got to pay monthly for a year. And by the end of January, they've given up. Why? Because when they realize they got to start getting up earlier in the morning, all of a sudden it doesn't sound like fun anymore. When they realize they have to drive to get there, and it's cold when you get up in January, and sometimes the roads are icy. Well, okay, I knew this is my exercise day, but I don't really want to go out on those roads, so maybe I'll just, it's not as easy when it comes to actually doing it as what it sounded like. It's a good idea, but it's not easy. Are we really going to put the effort behind our resolution? Well, Paul has his resolutions in the book of Philippians. Philippians chapter 3, verse 13 to 14. Now, this probably wasn't New Year's Eve that he made this resolution, but this is a resolution that Paul made. And I want to talk about this morning because it would be good if all of us could adopt Paul's resolution. Again, we have to be willing to follow through and do it. Philippians chapter 3, verses 13 to 14. Paul said, one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Now he starts out by saying, this one thing I'm going to do. I'm going to do one thing, but then he mentions 2 things that he's going to do. Can he not count? No, it's really those 2 things are related. He says, I want to move ahead to the future, but I realize that I can't move into the future until I let go of the past. If I'm living in the past, I can't go forward. So it's kind of one thing that's combined. Forgetting the past and moving ahead, pressing ahead to the future. Okay? I think a big reason that so many people fail in keeping their New Year's resolutions, other than what I just talked about it being difficult, is because it's impossible to move forward and do something new when you're still dragging all of your old habits and still trying to do all the things the way you always did them. To get something new, you have to let something go. All of us have things in our past that we don't like. We have failures. We have hurts. We've made mistakes. Anybody here has never made a mistake? Grant, okay? Anybody here, you don't have any failures? You've never failed? How about no hurts? There's no hurts in the past. Either hurts that you've done yourself or hurts that somebody else has done. We all have those things. The devil wants to keep reminding us of those things. He wants us to focus so much on our past mistakes or our past failures or our past hurts that we give up on the future and we live there in those hurts and in those failures. Paul had a lot of things in his past that he wasn't proud of. He wasn't proud of the things that he did prior to his conversion. He wasn't proud of the fact that he had persecuted believers and opposed the gospel. He wasn't going to let his past mistakes hold him back, though. Those things were in his past. He couldn't change them, but there's no sense dwelling on them. I'm sure the devil came to him every once in a while and said, Paul, why do you think you can do what you're doing now? Remember who you were. You're talking to those same, Paul, you can't do that. Paul said, that's in the past. I'm not living in the past. I'm living in the future. I'm pressing on towards what I want instead of what I had. Instead of beating himself up for his past mistakes, he was looking ahead to a better future. Before we can move ahead, we have to be able to let go of the past. Who you are today is a result of the decisions you've made in the past. But you don't have to let those past decisions define who you will be in the future. You can allow your past failures to keep you in the rut that you're in by continuing to do the same things you've always done. Or you can change your course and strain. Notice that word that Paul used. Straining towards what is ahead. He realized it was not going to be the easiest course of action. The easiest course of action is to keep living the way I'm living. It's difficult to move forward. Straining on to a better future. It's easy to do what you've always done. It's familiar. You don't have to think about it. It comes naturally. You just do it out of habit. But if you want something better, you have to work for it. That's why most people give up on their New Year's resolutions in the first month. They found out it was going to put them out of their comfort zone. They were going to have to change their schedule, give up some of the things they enjoy. Very few people enjoy change. But to move forward, we have to change. Our own failures aren't the only thing that holds us back, though. Sometimes we're held back because we can't let go of somebody else's failure. Somebody else tried something and it didn't work, and since it didn't work for them, we determine it's not going to work for us. Now, there are sometimes we can learn from somebody else's mistake, but other times, God calls us to do something, and they weren't successful just because that wasn't the way God designed them. They didn't have what it took. We can do it, but sometimes we allow somebody else's failure to hold us back. Sometimes we need to try something on our own. There are some things you shouldn't try on your own, but sometimes we just need to try and see if we can make it work. Or somebody did something that hurt us in some way. Somebody did something to us or said something to us and it hurt. And we keep dwelling on that hurt. We keep stirring that up. We keep reminding ourselves of that thing that person did, and it wasn't fair and it wasn't right. And I don't like that person because they did that to me and I can't forgive them. If we can't forgive hurts, if we can't forget what somebody has done to us, it will hold us where we're at and we'll never be able to move forward. We need to be able to forget our failures, other people's failures, and we need to forget the hurts. There were people that had done some pretty bad things to Paul. In fact, this letter to the Philippian church was written while he was in prison. Why was he in prison? For false accusations that were made against him. He had never really done it. He had not even broken the Roman law. A lot of times we think he's in prison because he was preaching the gospel. Well, yeah, that is why he was in prison, but it was not against the Roman law for him to preach the gospel. He was there because the religious Jews didn't like him and they made false accusations about him. So he's in prison. And when he says, I'm forgetting the past, part of what he's forgetting is those hurts. He's choosing to forgive those people. It's not just his failures. I am forgetting the past, all the past. I'm also going to forget those hurts, those people who have falsely accused me. Paul said, I may not have deserved any of this, but I'm not going to let that define who I am. I'm not going to let that hold me back from doing what I'm called to do. I'm not going to be held back by my own mistakes, and I'm not going to be held back by the mistakes of others. What happened in the past is behind me, and I'm looking forward to the future. In parts of the United States, there's a poisonous snake called the coral snake. Some of you have probably seen pictures of it. Anybody ever seen a real coral snake in the wild, not in a terrarium in a zoo? You've seen a real one? The coral snake is one of the most poisonous snakes. The venom of the coral snake is one of the most deadliest venoms of any snake in the world. But the people that know the secret of the coral snake are rarely killed by a coral snake. Because although the coral snake's although the coral snake's venom is very deadly, the coral snake has no fangs like a rattlesnake in which to inject its poison. It has poison, but the only way it can get its poison into you is to hold on tight and start gnawing, like a dog gnawing on a bone. It starts grinding its teeth and rubbing them back and forth until finally its tiny little teeth break through the skin. Then the venom gets in. So people that know that, if they get bitten by a coral snake, they don't panic. They just shake the coral snake off or yank him off before he has a chance to get the teeth in deep. Because if he can't hold on, he can't get his venom into you. The devil is like that coral snake. The devil is always bringing up our past hurts, our past failures, other people's hurts, things they've said about us. He's coming and he's grabbing on and he's got that poison and he wants to hold on and start gnawing on us. He's nipping at our heel and gnawing on us, trying to get that venom in. And if we allow him to hold on, if we dwell on those thoughts, his poison gets into us and it destroys us. But when the devil nips at us and he tries to take that bite and he bites us, if we realize what he's doing, we can simply say, yeah, that happened, but I'm not dwelling on it. Get out of here. Throw him away. And if we don't allow that poison to get in, it won't destroy us. But a lot of people have been destroyed by past hurts, by past failures, because they live there. They dwell on those things. However, there's something else that Paul says he's going to forget. It's not right there, but it's in there. Because we always think of the failures and the hurts, and we say, yeah, I know I need to let go of those. I'm just having trouble letting go of those. You need to let God deal with those things and help you get rid of them. You can't move forward without those. But there are other people that get held back for another reason. Not a failure, not a hurt. Paul says, I am forgetting the past. When he says that, he means he's forgetting all the past. Because there are a lot of people that never move forward because they have too many fond memories of the past. They're holding on to the good things of the past. I can never top that. I can never do better than that. That was so great. And so all their memories are in the past. We can't move forward when our memories are all in the past. We need to be able to let those things go. Past accomplishments can cause us to get nostalgic. It's almost as if we have built a trophy case in our minds of all the great things that we did in the past. We spend all our time looking at those trophies and patting ourselves on the back for the good things that we've done. Jerry, you've lived a pretty good life. You're a pretty good person. I'll bet other people wish they were you. There's nothing wrong with fond memories as long as we don't live in the past. When all we do is focus on the way things used to be, we aren't making any progress. So let's go back just to show you that Paul intends this in his scripture that we read. Let's go back to verse 7 of Philippians chapter 3. In Philippians chapter 3, verse 7, he says, whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. Everything in my past that was good, all of my accomplishments, and he had just got done talking about a lot of his accomplishments and his education, his pedigree, all these things that people would say, man, you're a great man because of all those things. He says, I'm counting those as a loss. Because if I just sit there and brag about those, if I just sit there and think about all those good things I've done, I'm not going to be doing anything today because I'm going to be saying, good job, Paul. So I'm considering all my accomplishments, all the good things in the past, not just the bad things in the past, but even the good things. I'm considering them lost. I'm putting them behind me because I don't want to live there. I still have a future ahead of me. Paul's in prison. He's facing very possible execution. It's doubtful that he'll ever be released. It would have been easy for him to spend his days thinking about all of the great things that he'd done in his past. He could have spent his final days bragging about all the people that he had brought to Christ and all the great things that he had done for the kingdom. I mean, that'd be the natural thing to do. Just sit there and say, man, Paul, you've lived a good life. Look at all the people you've won to Christ. Look at all the churches you've... Paul, you have had a really successful life. You know, it's doubtful you're ever going to get out of this place anyway. So, Paul, just sit here and just think about your good life that you've lived. He's probably advanced in years at this point. At this point in his life, if we read through the New Testament, the stories we see there, Paul has probably accomplished more for the kingdom than any other person alive. I mean, he's probably accomplished more than Peter and John and all those. They had great lives. But Paul, look at all the things Paul did. And Paul could have said, man, Paul, you've done your share. Look at all the things you've done. Let the other guys have a chance to catch up to you. But he didn't do that. He said, I'm forgetting all of those things. He could have said, my best years are in the past. There's not a whole lot that I can do while I'm here in prison. I can't go out and do those things anymore. So I might as well just sit here and just remember the good old days. I had some good days. But instead he said, the past is the past. I've had some successes. I've had some failures. But none of that matters. I don't know how much time I have left on this earth. And I maybe can't do the things I used to do. But there's still something I can do. What can I do while I'm here? He said, I know what I'll do. Let me write a letter to the church in Philippi. Let me just encourage the believers there. I might not be winning anybody new for the kingdom, but let me be an encouragement to them. Let me write a letter to the Philippian church. Let me write a letter to my friend Timothy. Let me encourage him. Let me write a letter to Philemon. Let me write a letter. He spent his time in prison writing letters. Most of his letters were written while he was in prison. There's a few that weren't. Most of them were written while he was in prison. And he probably thought, you know what? I'm not as successful as I used to be. I used to plant churches. I used to win people to Christ. Now I'm just encouraging believers. And it's not as great of a thing, but it's something. But if we stop and look at the impact those letters had, when he was writing the letters, he had no idea that we would be reading those letters 2,000 years later. The impact that he had for the kingdom of God through those letters that he wrote while he was in prison, they have had more impact for the eternal kingdom than everything he did prior to that time. What would have happened if he had just sat back and said, well, I can't do that anymore, so I'm just going to sit here and just enjoy the rest of my life. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to dream about the past because it was a good past. But he said, no, that was good. What I can do now may not be as great, although it turned out greater. I'm going to do what I can. I'm not going to let the past define me, whether it's good or bad. I'm not going to let the past define me. If Paul had decided to just sit there and reminisce, no one would have blamed him. They probably would have come and reminisced with him. They would have come to visit Paul and say, hey, Paul, let's just sit here and talk about all the great things you've done, because you've done a lot of great things. Paul, let's just sit here and let's just dream about those things. I mean, you know, you could be executed tomorrow, and let's go out with just good memories. But because Paul put the past behind him and looked to the future, he still accomplished great things for the kingdom of God. There are a lot of Christians today who are virtually useless because they're too busy thinking about all the things they did when they were younger. I used to do this, and I used to do that, or our church used to do this, our church used to do that. You know what? You've probably done a lot of great things in your life. And I know this church has done a lot of great things throughout history. I go back and I read the history. This church has done a lot of great things. But you know what? It doesn't have to be what we used to do. God still has work for us to do. It may not look exactly like what it used to look like. It may be totally different than that. But God still has work for us to do. Let's not let the past define us. Let's say, God, our best days are ahead. Walk with us. Guide us. Show us what to do. Don't let us get lazy. Don't let us get nostalgic. Don't let us get tied up in this change or that change or this hurt or that hurt. Go with us, God. Let's make these latter days better than the former days. There's a reason that the windshield on a car is bigger than the rearview mirror. It's because what is ahead is more important than what was behind. We glance in there every once in a while to get a reference point for what's back there and to make sure nobody's going to pass us, right? But the biggest view is in front because where we're going is more important than where we've been. God basically said the same thing to the Israelites through the prophet Isaiah. It was a dry season for the Israelites. There didn't seem to be a lot of good things happening. Politically, it was bad. Economically, it was bad. Some of you say, kind of sounds like the U.S. right now. The Israelites spent all their time either grumbling about current events or thinking about when things were better, dreaming of the good old days. They loved to tell stories of the great things that God did years ago. And it was at a time like that that God spoke through the prophet Isaiah and said in Isaiah chapter 43, verses 18 and 19, forget the former things, both the good and the bad. Don't dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Those things were great, but I have new things, better things that I want to do now. Now it springs up. Don't you perceive it? No, and they didn't perceive it because they were living in the past. They couldn't see what he was doing now because they were living in the past. Don't you perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. When we're looking to the past, we aren't accomplishing anything for the future. And we're actually not accomplishing anything even now because we're looking at the past. The Bible instructs us to forget the past, both the successes and the failures, and focus on what is still ahead. Paul's exact words were forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead. Because Paul realizes it's not going to be easy for him to change the way he's doing things. He's in a habit. It was easy for him to continue to do what he's done. In fact, he even had to find ways to write the letters because he had trouble writing. He usually had somebody write for him. We're not sure exactly why, there's speculation, but it was not an easy task for him to do that. But he said, I'm going to strain because that's what I can do now. So I'm going to strain. I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to figure out how to make this happen because there's still something I can do. Straining towards what is ahead. Paul's using the analogy of an Olympic athlete because the Olympics were really popular back then, even more popular than they are now. An Olympic athlete, a runner, runs with all his might. As he approaches the finish line, he doesn't say, okay, I'm almost there. I can relax. When he gets closer, the closer he gets to the finish line, the harder he pushes. I ran cross country and track for a couple years until I broke my leg playing football. And the coach always told us, you put everything you have at the beginning of the race. But when you get to the end of the race, find something you didn't know you had. Because that's when you push harder. My side is hurting. My legs have cramps. I'm dying of thirst. I just want to quit. Remember that first place I got last week? Can't we stop with that? I got that trophy. No, because there's another race to win. And it may be hurting, but the finish line is right there. And I'm going to press towards that. It doesn't matter how hard it hurts. It doesn't matter how I feel. That's the finish line. And I'm going to push even harder to get there. Why is it that we give up and say, look at what I did in the past? God says, there's still a race for you to run right now. Paul says he's forgetting the past, straining towards the future. But what's he pressing towards? What's the future he's pressing towards? The answer is in verses 7 and 8. We already read 7. In verse 7, he says, whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. The only thing that matters to Paul is what matters to God. I'm forgetting everything else for the sake of Christ. The only thing that matters is what does Christ want. He wasn't thinking about what would make him better. He wasn't thinking about his comfort. He was thinking about what he could do to serve God better and to better fulfill God's purpose in his life. His whole life was lived for the proclamation of the gospel of Christ. Have you ever stopped to think about what the purpose of most New Year's resolutions are? New Year's resolutions that we make or that we hear about people making? The most common resolutions have to do something with something physical. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to quit drinking. It has something to do with our physical. And that's a proven thing. Most New Year's resolutions have to do with something physical, but it's something for me. Now, those are all good things. A lot of us could probably live healthier if we were to lose some weight. If you give up cigarettes, that's going to help you out. Give up alcohol, that's going to help you out. But Paul's resolutions, Paul didn't say, okay, I'm here. It's time for me to give up some bad habits. He said, you know what? Hopefully those things will just happen as I get closer to Christ automatically. But my goal is to press into God, to do more of his purpose. Then next to the physical resolutions, there are resolutions to better ourselves. I'm going to go back to school, finish my education. I'm going to learn a new hobby. I'm going to get more organized. Something that's going to help me personally. Again, those are great things. Finishing your education is great. Learning a new hobby is great. But in the eternal realm of things, what does it matter? What shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? Then close behind those, we have resolutions which sound noble in character, but if we really boil them down, a lot of times, I'm not going to say all the time, but a lot of times they're even selfish in nature. I resolved this year to be in church every Sunday. Sounds noble, sounds great. But if you boil it right down, even those resolutions a lot of times are made for the wrong reasons. Because I'm tired of the pastor calling me every week and hounding me. I'm tired of my wife hounding me to be in church. My mom and dad have been worried about me. This will make my mom and dad feel better because I'm back in church. So even those resolutions, and then some people do it just because they're afraid they're going to go to hell if they don't go to church. Jesus might come back next week, and if I wasn't in church on Sunday, I'm going to hell. That's not the right reason to go to church. So even those resolutions sound noble, a lot of times are selfish in nature. Why not? I'm going to go to church because I want to get closer to God. And I know the church is going to help me do that. That's the good reason to go back to church. Or I'm going to spend more time in the Word this week. Why? Because I want all my friends on Bible Gateway to see that I've been following my Bible study plan. See, none of those things I've talked about are bad, but our motives are often not pure. Our motives should be God motives. What does God want? I want to know God more, and I want to find out more about his purpose for my life. So I'm going to go to church so I can hear the Word. I'm going to spend time in the Word so I can hear what he has to say. I'm going to spend time in prayer because I want to have a conversation with him. I'm not going to pray just to tell him what I want, but I want to spend time talking to him so I can find out what he wants, because my desire, my goal is to know him and what he wants. He continues in verse 8. Paul says, what is more? I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage that I may gain Christ. Look at that. I'm considering everything as a loss because nothing else compares to simply knowing Christ. Knowing Christ is the only thing that I want. I want to know him better. Wouldn't that be a great New Year's resolution? My resolution for this year is to know Christ better. The only thing that mattered to Paul was knowing Christ. Resolutions to lose weight, get out of debt, and all those things that people promise to do every year aren't bad. But what would happen if all of us forgot those resolutions and simply said, my goal this year is to know, to really know Christ, to fully understand who he is, what he came here to do, and how I fit into his plan? If we totally committed our lives to that one thing, knowing Christ, it would change the world. as we know it today. If we were truly in tune with Jesus, the only thing that would matter to us would be fulfilling his mission here on earth. And what is his mission? What is it that's important to Jesus? We have it on the wall of our lobby. We've been talking about it for several years. 3 things that Jesus said when he's here on earth, the 3 commands that he gave. Somebody came to Jesus and said, what's the greatest commandment of all? He said, love God with all. Key word is all. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second commandment is love your neighbor. Love people. And then, just before he left the earth, the last command he gave was, go into the whole world, preach the gospel to all creation. What if our New Year's resolutions this year were based on those 3 things? My goal this year is to learn to love God more. I already love him, but my goal is to learn to love him more. My goal is to learn to know him more. My 3 goals for this year are love God, love people, and share Christ. What if we all adopted that as our mantra for the new year? Those are the 3 things. I mean, if I happen to get in shape at the same time, great. That's a bonus. But the things that really matter, nothing is gonna get in the way of this. I mean, I made a New Year's resolution to work out, and I haven't done it all week, so I can skip church today, and I can go work out to keep my New Year's Nope, but I made this other New Year's resolution. Love God. That trumps this one over here. I'm not going to let that get in the way of this one, because this one's more important. Love God. Love people. Share Christ. That's the best resolution, the best resolutions that we can make this year. And that's really what Paul says in this passage in Philippians chapter 3. He says, I'm forgetting everything else and just concentrating on the things that really matter. What matters? Knowing Christ and loving people, because everything Paul did was about loving people. And his writing letters was because of his love for people. And sharing Christ. I may not be able to do it by planting churches anymore, but I can share Christ by writing letters. Those are the only 3 things that matter. Loving God, loving people, and sharing Christ. So if we were to adopt those goals, and then this time next year we were to look back at 2018, do you think we might see progress if we all concentrated on those 3 things? Not saying we didn't have any progress last year, but do you think we might see more progress if every morning we woke up and those things were on our minds? Today I'm going to love God. I'm going to love people. I'm going to share Christ. Because Paul says that should be our goal if we're a believer. In verse 15, Paul says, all of us then who are mature should take such a view of things. How many in this room like to think yourselves as mature? Raise your hand. I'm not saying you are mature, but how many like to think of yourselves as mature? Raise your hand. 1. Okay, I got a few. We would all like to be. If somebody came up and said, "You're really immature," is that a compliment? We want to think of ourselves as mature. Now, childlike, that's a compliment. Immature, I'm not sure that's a compliment at this age. We like to think of ourselves as mature. Paul says, if you're mature, all of us who are mature should view things the same way he views them. How did he view things? Oh, then he says, and if on some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you. So he says, I'm right, you're wrong. This is what God's revealed to me. This is the right way. You may not see it this way now, but I'm going to be praying for you. And if you don't see it that way, I'm praying that you'll come around to see it the same way I see it. The only thing that matters is God and his kingdom. All the other stuff is extra stuff. It's the only thing that matters. If you're mature, you'll already think like me. If you're immature, I'm going to pray that you grow up. That's basically what Paul said. If we're a believer, we should only have one goal: to pursue Christ and fulfill his mission. It's not about how much I can accumulate for myself or how I can better myself. It's about how can I further the kingdom of God and help bring his kingdom to the world. To do that, I need to forget the past. Past failures, past hurts, and past accomplishments and successes. They're all in the past. It doesn't matter if the past was good or bad. What decisions am I going to make today? And what are my goals for the future? It won't be easy. That's why Paul says straining towards what is ahead. It won't be easy. But my eyes on the goal. The goal, the ultimate goal, is for the whole world to know Jesus. That's really, when he boiled it all down, that's the goal. That the whole world would know Jesus. And until that goal is accomplished, the race isn't over. And the closer we get to the goal, the harder we push. Because there's the finish line. It won't be easy. But I'm going to strain towards the goal. I'll make whatever sacrifices I need to make. I'll work, no matter how hard it gets. I'm going to put my own desires and my own comfort aside for the only thing that really matters. My goal, my resolution, and I hope you'll join me, is to love God with all my heart, all my soul, all my mind, and all my strength. And because I love God, I love the people that he created and the people that he loved. And because of my love for God and my love for people, I want to share the good news of the gospel with them.